together, coming up short and giving up never. Weave it together. Come along, come along, come along, come along. Mending it together. A world on fire can't last forever. We're gonna mend it together. A stitch in time is gonna save nine. A stitch in time is gonna save nine. And I wanna be a catalyst for change, trying something different. I wanna change the rules of the game, 'cause even the smallest bird can fly up to the top of the tree. And I wanna be a catalyst and find out what could be. Dreaming together. Some say hope is a thing with feathers. We're gonna dream together. It sings a song, never stops at all. It sings a song, never stops at all. And I wanna be a catalyst for change, trying something different. I wanna change the rules of the game, 'cause even the smallest bird can fly up to the top of the tree. And I wanna be a catalyst and find out what could be. Walk along together, side by side, through this stormy weather. We're gonna walk along together, hand in hand, hand in hand, hand in hand, hand in hand. And I wanna be a catalyst.
Can you all see my screen down here?
Yeah, see it.
30 is a movement of social entrepreneurs and innovators embracing collective action to achieve the SDGs by the deadline 2030. Our 1,500 members are active in 197 countries. By emphasizing collaborations, Catalyst 2030 is leveraging the power of the collective to accelerate real change in the lives of billions of people around the globe. What do our members say about Catalyst?
Catalyst 2030 is an invaluable global community of impact entrepreneurs.
Our relationship with Catalyst 2030 has really taught us the power of co-creation.
Join Catalyst 2030 and network, bond, and collaborate with our family members.
And I like the spirit of bringing change makers together to share and learn from each other.
Catalyst really understands the transformative nature of collaboration.
It's also a platform that can give us new tools and resources.
Catalyst 2030 has put my work on steroids.
But most importantly, to come up with solutions that are practical, ways where we can really make things happen, because social entrepreneurs are doers.
Are you a catalyst? Join us to achieve the SDGs.
Good morning, everyone. We'd like to welcome you to this session. I'll be handing over back to Stella, who's the session host. I hope you have a good session, and I look forward to the outcomes of this session. Thank you so much, Stella. It's up to you.
Thank you, My name is Stella Sabu, chairperson of Employment Plan, and today I'm to share on climate change adaptation in its context in Tanzania. What is climate change actually? Climate change is a change of climate which is attributed directly or indirectly to human activities that alter the composition of the global atmosphere and which are in addition to natural climate change variability observed over comparable time periods. The change may occur over decades or even millennia. It may affect one or more seasons and involves changes in one or more aspects of the weather, such as rainfall, temperature, or winds. Climate change poses a serious threat to countries in developing countries like Tanzania, who are already struggling to sustain their livelihoods and maintain food security. What causes climate change? Actually, climate change arises from both natural and human anthropogenic activities. For natural phenomena that causes climate change includes continental drift, volcanic eruptions, and differences in ocean currents. However, the recent changing climate is mainly attributed to anthropogenic activities, which are also continued in Tanzania as well. We are more renewed with anthropogenic activities. Anthropogenic activities that lead to climate change include burning of fossil fuels such as coal and oil from industrial activities and transportation. Other activities such as bushfires, deforestation, unsustainable agriculture practices, and animal husbandry are also contributing to climate change, but at a relatively lower level than fossil fuel sources are doing. Both natural and anthropogenic activities lead to increase of atmospheric greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, methane, chlorofluorocarbons, nitrogen trifluoride, and nitrous oxide. That causes an increase in global temperature, resulting into global warming. In the recent years, the global climate has been changing faster than expected, mainly due to the fact that over the last 200 years, human development and industrialization in developed countries have led to faster changes in the atmosphere caused by increased concentration of greenhouse gases. That resulted to increase in average Earth temperatures. The phenomena which causes the average Earth temperature to increase is known as the greenhouse effect. Greenhouse effect refers to the situation where the short wavelength of visible light from the sun passes through a transparent medium where greenhouse gases layer and are absorbed. But the longer wavelength of the infrared radiation from the heated object are unable to pass through that medium. The trapping of the long wavelength radiation leads to more heating and higher resultant temperature. I'm also going to talk on how climate change affects the farmers in Tanzania. Majority of people who are living in Tanzania are farmers. The effect of climate change to the farmers are associated with extreme weather conditions, which can cause adverse impacts on various sectors and the livelihood of the communities at large. The aspect of climate, the aspect of adverse impact can be categorized into short-term, medium, and long-term impacts. Short-term impacts require short-term activities, whereas long-term impacts require proper planning, including stages related to integrated climate change into the planning process. Here, I start with the short-term impact. In short-term impact, the impacts are associated with the extreme weather events which can occur within a short period of time. Such events may include floods, drought, heat waves, and windstorms. Under such a situation, most communities in the country, including farming communities, often fall victim due to their inadequate preparedness and lack of adaptive capacities. In medium-term impacts, these manifest themselves through slow onset of climate change adverse impacts, such as gradual changing of cropping season, seasonal calendar. In this context, farming communities in Tanzania may find it difficult to cope with appropriate farming practices arising as a consequence of the changing environment. Another thing is on long-term impacts. These are the impacts of climate change, which can be noticeable after a long-term experience of such a situation. Such impacts may eventually lead to gradual changes of ecosystem and agro-ecological shifts, which may as well affect crop production and livestock keeping. This adverse impact can lead to loss and damage of both property and life. Trade imbalance arising from ecosystem and agro-ecological shifts, allowing non-traditional crop production and outbreak of new pests and diseases. Such trends altogether can contribute to increased risk and vulnerability of farming communities whose adaptive capacity is already low. Let me tell you how climate change affects agro-ecological zones in Tanzania. In Tanzania, we have more than 49 agro-ecological zones, which can be generalized into 7 main zones. These zones are like, we have zone 1, we have a coastal belt, which receives which are below 750 meters above sea level. And we have zone 2, which are arid areas, which lengthy from 500 to 180 millimeters above sea level. We have zone 3, which are in semi-arid lands, which are in low, medium, and undulating plains. And we have zone 4, which are in plateau X, medium altitude plains. In western and southern areas with some rocky hills, lift valleys, scarps, and swamps. And we have zone 5, which are in southern, southwestern, and western highlands. And then 6, we have northern highlands and granitic mountains. And the last zone is within alluvial plains, which are flooded plains with alluvial fens and swamps comprising of seasonally flooded alluvial and lacustrine sediments. Rainfall is unimodal of variable reliability and ranges between 500 and 1,008 millimeters per year. The major agro-ecological zones of Tanzania has been affected and will continue to be affected differently by the impact of climate change. This is due to the fact that these zones have different characteristics. While some of the zones might receive more rains, other zones might be drier. For example, in the northwest and coastal region, which used to get bimodal rains, the situation has changed totally, such that the areas are now getting unimodal rains. Due to this change, crop production in these areas is expected to decrease by about 30% in the next 20 years. This situation is expected to become even more pronounced in most of the agroecological zones, including southern highlands, which were major producers of food crops like maize and beans. This has a bearing on both crop and livestock production sector. Sectors like agriculture and livestock have already affected. In agriculture, the majority of Tanzanians depend largely on land-fed agriculture, which employs about 75% of the population. Therefore, any form of climate change impacts brings a significant challenge, especially to the small-scale farmers. Due to this, the adverse impacts of climate change are already having their toll in the livelihoods of people and in all sectors of the economy. Frequent and severe droughts in many parts of the country are being felt with the associated consequences on food production and water scarcity, among others. In most parts of the country, onset of the rain season is unpredictable, and thus farmers are uncertain when to plant. There have been evidence of increased and new pests and diseases causing massive crop losses. This could be also associated to climate change. In livestock and rangelands, most of the ruminant livestock are concentrated in the semi-arid areas, parts of Arusha, Dodoma, Iringa, Kilimanjaro, Manyara, Shinyanga, Mwanza, Singida, Mara, Tabora, Simiyu, Geita, Rukwa, and Katavi region, which are more suitable for livestock than any other form of agriculture. In these areas, climate change has led to prolonged dry season, resulting in reduced water, pastures, and crop residues for livestock. Climate change is predicted to increase disease vectors, which will consequently increase the incidence of vector-borne diseases of livestock, such as trypanosomiasis, East Coast fever, and Rift Valley fever. The increases of livestock mortality due to diseases and starvation might have considerable impacts on the local economies and the overall community livelihood, particularly given the shortage of livestock dipping facilities and low financial capacity of people to afford various livestock medications. Prolonged drought have led to severe loss of livestock in the past few years, particularly in the northern part of the country. How climate change affects other sectors? Apart from agriculture and livestock being affected by the climate change, another sector which have already affected by climate change in Tanzania is the water resources. Water resources in Tanzania includes rivers, lakes, wetlands, springs, reservoirs, groundwater aquifers, and many water bodies that are shared with neighboring countries. Severe and recurrent droughts in the past few years has led to a decrease in water flows in rivers. Hence, shrinkage of receiving lakes, declines of water levels in satellite lakes and dams. In some areas, perennial rivers have changed to seasonal rivers, and as a consequence, leading to shrinkage or disappearance of subsequent wetlands. In addition, seawater intrusion into freshwater ways has been experienced, especially in coastal areas, due to sea level rise, which is associated with climate change. Another sector which have been affected is on fisheries. The impact of climate change in fisheries in Tanzania is mainly associated with destruction of degradation of fish nursery grounds, bleeding, and an impact. Another sector which have been affected is the on fisheries sector. The impact of climate change in fisheries is mainly associated with this destruction of degradation of fish nursery grounds, breeding and feeding areas. One of the most shrinking signs that climate change has an impact to marine fisheries is the destruction of coral reefs, which is a critical habitat for fish in the coastal environments. Destruction of coral reefs due to coral bleaching caused by rise of sea surface temperature is among the factors impacting marine fisheries. Sea level rise, which is associated with global warming, may cause sea water to rise above optimal levels of some corals. Increased water depth, for example, can restrict the amount of sunlight needed for coral growth. Further climate change is impacting fish migration patterns, thereby affecting fish recruitment and stock in traditional fishing sites, especially for artisanal fisher folks. Sedimentation in freshwater bodies is negatively affecting fisheries by destroying breeding and feeding sites. This problem can be aggravated by drought and frequent floods resulting from climate change. Another sector which has been affected by climate change in Tanzania is the forest ecosystem and biodiversity. Forest and woodlands are the source of for most of the wood and non-wood products. Wood products include timber, poles, firewood, and charcoal. Non-wood products include ropes, laces, tie and dye, colorings, wildlife, fruits, plant medicine, natural vegetables, palm leaves for making baskets and mats, honey, beeswax, and mushrooms. Furthermore, forests and woodlands do provide other goods and services such as food, water, and the other protective function to people. Climate change impacts on forest ecosystem and biodiversity are expected to vary depending on vegetation type. The common impacts to all forest types include loss of biodiversity, disappearance of wildlife habitats, increased risk of bushfires, limited availability of forest products and ecosystem shift. For example, forest to woodland, forest to woodlands or woodlands to grasslands. Species that are expected to be more vulnerable are those with limited geographical range and heat intolerance. Low germination rates, low survival rate of seedlings, and limited seed dispersal or migration capabilities. Given the high dependence on forest by large number of population in Tanzania, particularly as a source of energy and livelihood, climate change impacts on this sector will affect the socio-economic and the cultural setting of both urban and rural communities. And the communities are already affected on this sector of forest ecosystem and biodiversity. Human-wildlife conflicts are becoming common phenomena in some areas, especially in years with the drought. The main reason for this conflict is crop raiding by wild animals when migrating and searching for pastures and water. The animals commonly involved in this conflict are hippopotamus, monkeys, elephants, and buffaloes. This may be aggravated with the changing climate. Another sector which has been affected by climate change in Tanzania is on the human health sector. The tropical climate is favorable to most major vector-borne diseases, including malaria, schistosomiasis, onchocerciasis, trypanosomiasis, plague, Rift Valley fever, yellow fever, and tick-borne homological fevers. Malaria has been common in higher temperature and in humid lowlands areas, especially during the after rain season. But with the changes in temperature and the rainfall regimes, there are already reported incidences of epidemic malaria, especially in highland areas that were traditionally free from mosquitoes and malaria, such as the highland areas of Tanga, Kilimanjaro, Iringa, Kagera, and Mbeya. This area has already affected by malaria compared to the previous years where there were no malaria problem. The epidemics in these areas are also linked with El Nino events. Incidences of foodborne and waterborne diseases such as dysentery, diarrhea, cholera, and typhoid are also on the increase due to extreme weather events such as floods, which affect water quality. Another sector which has been affected by climate change in Tanzania is on energy. Biomass energy accounts another sector which has been affected by climate change in Tanzania is on energy. Biomass energy accounts for about 90% of the total national energy consumption. Over 90% of rural population relies on the energy sources such as wood, charcoal, crop waste, and manure for cooking and heating, while kerosene is used for lighting. With increasing climate change impacts on the biomass resources, the traditional energy sources may be rendered very expensive and unavailable to the local communities, especially to the marginalized women and youth. As a result of increasing climate change over the last years, the country has experienced increasing instances of recurrent and prolonged droughts, with a severe implication on hydropower generation due to reduced water inflows from catchment areas. Power rationing and blackouts have become a common phenomenon in most areas of Tanzania. This affects individuals, households, and industrial income generating activities. Another sector which has been affected by climate change in Tanzania is on infrastructure. Increased extreme weather events such as floods have been and will continue to cause damage to infrastructures, including roads, railways, airports, and harbors. Communication system on the buildings. For example, in December 2009 and January 2010, unusual heavy rainfall associated with El Nino events led to widespread flooding in Morogoro region, in Krosa districts, and in the Dodoma region in Mpwapwa and Kongwa districts, have caused severe damage to roads, bridges, water dams, railways, electricity poles, drainage networks, water supply system, and human settlements. In April 2011, also in Morogoro region, in Kiombero districts, heavy rains caused the floods, which destroyed 60 bridges, several roads, and human settlements. All of these are evidences on the effects which has been caused by climate change in Tanzania. Another sector is on industries. Most of industries are concentrated on manufacturing of simple consumer goods like food, beverages, tobacco, textiles, and furniture, as well as wood and allied products, of which they depend much on agro products. The large dependence on agricultural materials means that the industrial sector is, like agriculture, vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Despite the agro-based nature of most of these industries, the power supply is mainly from hydro sources, which are again vulnerable to climate change impacts, particularly drought. Therefore, climate change impacts will adversely affect the sector and the people's well-being at large. Let me go on what can we do about climate change. In Tanzania, we learned to live with the changing climate adaptation. But even if the world stops emitting greenhouse gases today, we would not escape the impending effects of climate change. Significant changes in the type, frequency, intensity, duration, and the distribution of climate-induced hazards can still be expected, even under relatively modest scenarios of climate change. Further physical impact, including changes in temperature, extremes such as heat waves and an increase in the frequency and intensity of storms. Such impact, combined with high dependency on natural resources and land agriculture, means that many parts of Tanzania will continue to be vulnerable in the coming decades. Therefore, local communities need to learn how to live and sustain their livelihoods in the changing climate through being empowered with different NGOs like Empowering Plan Tanzania and the other climate change NGOs which are found in Tanzania and which are within the world. For this reason, effective strategies and plans for adaptation to both climate change and climate variability are of central importance to the communities to ensure communities are continued to practice development in vulnerable areas and the resilience of the communities to the impact of climate change. Apart from to live with the changing climate adaptation, also we can practice a reduction of greenhouse gas emission through ensuring sustainable development. Another thing, mitigation. Climate change is associated with both opportunities and challenges. While communities are struggling to live in the changing environment, efforts and measures should also be undertaken to promote farming activities that can enhance core benefits through efficient production. This can enable the farming communities to exploit opportunities that can contribute to reduction of greenhouse gases as a means to support their livelihood. Such mitigation measures include community capacity building on a friendly way of cultivation and the other sustainable agriculture practices for livestock and for livestock, including improved animal feeds and breeds. And what is climate change adaptation means? Climate change adaptation refers to an adjustment in the natural or human system in response to actual or expected climatic stimuli or their effects, which moderates harm or exploits beneficial opportunities. It aims to reduce vulnerability and improve the capacity of people, especially those who depend on climate-sensitive activities for their livelihood and sustainable development. Why adaptation is necessary? Adaptation is necessary in order to increase the resilience of the communities to the impacts of climate change. People have always adapted to variation in the climate by marking preparation based on the resources and knowledge acquired through experience of past weather patterns. Often, people reacted to extreme events such as floods or droughts as they occurred. However, the current measures are no longer adequate for coping with the expected long-term impact of climate change. Current coping strategy could be, for example, the storage of agricultural produce for future use, especially during difficult periods of drought or flood. Generally, it is believed that without adaptation, living conditions will severely degrade, while with good adaptation measures, prosperous life can still be achieved even under difficult climatic conditions expected. Adaptation demands an understanding of the existing vulnerability of individuals, households, and communities in order to build their adaptive capacity. Through effective adaptation measures, threats to human health, economic development, property, infrastructure, and ecosystem can be reduced. Lives will be savaged and the cost of climate change can be reduced. It is clear that people have already in the past been adapting to changing conditions and we continuously do so. There is a lot we can learn from past experience and perhaps can improve on them. For effective implementation of adaptation measures, it is necessary to address climate change impacts across its spectrum by using different strategies or different participatory methodologies. For instance, we can use a participatory approach like people's own processes, participatory learning and action, and you can also use the Pakediala, which is participatory assessment of disaster, participatory assessment of disaster risky to the community. And if we can also prepare adaptation planning so that to be achieved by the community. Through adaptation, this is a continuous process which entails learning, understanding, planning, and implementing activities which can include activities like to organize a farming community or planning meeting, whereby we can do a problem identification. We can also identify the causes of the problem. We can identify an appropriate action. We can identify responsible authorities. We can identify the resources required and the sources of such resources. We can also identify key barriers and remedial measures. We can develop indicators. We can develop action plan. We can implement a strategy and priority adaptation measures or action. And lastly, we can monitor and evaluate the implementation of activities to make sure that adaptation or mitigation has met. Also, let me share on some possible adaptation options, which, if we will be done, it will bring sustainable development in Tanzania. Farming communities in various agro-ecological zones can develop different adaptation strategies depending on the climatic challenges they face. For instance, on the sector of agriculture, adaptation options which I suggest is like small-scale irrigation, crop diversification, water harvesting, terracing or contour farming, use of organic manure, improved seed and crop varieties, disease-resistant and drought-tolerant seed varieties, and conservation agriculture. On livestock, I propose that we can, adaptation option can be breeding for resistant breed species diversification, tick and sessile fly controls, livestock extension services, livestock marketing infrastructure, zero grazing system, construction or rehabilitation of charcoal dams. And in the forest sector, the suggested option is like community-based forest management, ecosystem conservation of forest biodiversity, water catchment in soil fertility, and household or village wood lots, and use of traditional knowledge in forest conservation, as well as in situ conservation of indigenous species. In the water sector, the option which I suggest is integrated water resource management, exploitation of underground water, protection of water catchments, and rainwater harvesting, as well as construction of water dams. In fisheries, I suggest adaptation strategy to be management of geographical areas of concerns and critical habitats, as well as management of fresh water, and monitoring of fisheries habitat and species, as well as integrated data management system in the fisheries sector, and the promotion of aquaculture, as well as protection and conservation of aquatic ecosystem, and supporting alternative livelihood initiatives for the communities who are depending on fisheries activities. In the coastal and marine environment, I suggest the adaptation option to be protection and management of mangroves, conservation of lowland coastal forestry, as well as protecting the seashore by building barrier sea walls, and coastal erosion control, as well as promoting sustainable coastal land use planning, and enhancing protection and conservation of coastal and marine ecosystems, as well as supporting alternative livelihood initiatives of coastal communities so that to sustain their livelihood. In the health sector, the adaptation options is to promote conservation in situ and ex situ and the sustainable use of traditional alternative medicines, as well as the use of treated mosquito nets. In wildlife, adaptation options is conservation of wildlife resources, establishment of wildlife management area, protection of wildlife corridors, wildlife conservation awareness activity to the community, as well as establish wildlife zoos and sanctuaries. In energy, I suggest on the protection of water catchments, increasing availability of biomass resources, improvement of biomass to energy conservation efficiency, like the construction of improved stoves in the community, which are less cost effective, and increase the use of modern biomass to energy technologies and fuel switching. In wetlands, I suggest to insist on conservation and the protection of lakes, dams, swamps, rivers, and catchment areas. In tourism, I suggest diversification of livelihood and tourism attraction, as well as promotion of ecotourism. In land use, I suggest to insist on land use planning and management to promote landscape and management conservation. These are the livelihood adaptation, which Empowering Plans Tanzania are suggesting to be practiced in Tanzania, as well as the whole world, so that we can adapt on the climate change, which are happening in this world. That is all about my presentation.
Thank you so much, Stella. That was an amazing presentation. I'd like to open up the session. Is there anyone who has a question for Stella? Daniel, I see you smiling. Do you have a question?
Into Africa. It is much.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just wondering if you had been collaborating with any national or local governments to implement some of these solutions that you'd been talking about, because there are a lot of really good ideas. And I was wondering if there were any concrete plans, if any of this has started.
Stella?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, of course. I was just wondering if there had been if any of these solutions that you were giving us had started to be implemented by national or local governments in Tanzania, that you know of.
Actually, we are we are working with the local governments in Tanzania and the other experienced NGOs used to build capacity to the small organization like Empowering Plants Tanzania. And we have already started to implement a few strategies, few adaptation strategies among those which I have suggested.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Anyone else with a question? Andrew, Claudia, Julia, do you have a question for Stella?
There, I'll go. I'm curious, you talked a lot about a transition to sustainable agriculture, and I'd be curious to hear more about what are some of the barriers to that transition in Tanzania? I know in other markets, it's difficult to convince farmers that they should switch to sustainable agriculture because they have a perception that it'll make them less money. And when livelihoods are at stake, it can be difficult to make that switch. So yeah, what are some of the challenges that Tanzania faces?
It is true that there is a challenge of marketing in Tanzania, especially for the products which are from sustainable agriculture. But when I'm talking on sustainable agriculture, I'm also insisting on the health issues. Even if the farmers are not selling their products, but it's better if they consume themselves the products which have been a product from environmentally friendly practices, so that to maintain their healthy status. But for the issue of marketing, it is the issue which we can promote from different areas, because nowadays a lot of communities, apart from in Tanzania, even in out of Africa, and they are eager to buy products with the result of not application of industrial fertilizers and local seeds. So to Tanzania, for Empowering Plants Tanzania, the marketing is not a problem because we have a lot of marketing officers which are very knowledgeable in marketing strategies. We can connect with them so that we can find markets for the communities who have products which are environmentally friendly.
Thank you, really interesting.
Thank you so much. Anyone else with a question? I think it's none. Mine is just to commend you, Stella. I think that was a beautiful presentation in the climate space and in the environmental space. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm here to help, as you know, anytime we can collaborate on any project on environment. Just let me know when. And I'll also be connecting you to Julia later on after CCW. She might have a project that might be of interest to you in the environmental space. So just be on the lookout for my email or my WhatsApp at any one point. Thank you so much, everyone who joined us today. It's been an amazing session. Stella, unataka kuambia watu kwa heri? Nikuachie hii fursa kuambia asante na kwa heri.
Sawa.
Niwe Stella sasa.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining me during my presentation. And what I want to insist is that the issue of climate change in Tanzania is very big and is very touching, specifically to the marginalized groups of women and youth who are mostly affected by this climate change. So we have to make sure that empowerment of the small organization like Empowering Plants Tanzania is very important, because empowering plants is reaching the marginalized groups very easier compared to the international organization, which are very far from Tanzania. So I call the action so that the international funders and donors can be touched with these situations which are happening in Tanzania. Women are very much suffering with these climate effects which are happening in Tanzania. Youth are very much suffering. So on the opportunities which I have mentioned in my presentation, we can empower the community so that they can start their income generating activities like beekeeping, horticulture, home gardening, fishing in a sustainable way, so that they can live in a harmony way. Apart from that, Tanzania is suffering so much on climate change effects. Thank you very much for joining me and for your encouragement.
Thank you, Stella.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I also see in the chat someone is saying thank you very much. A lot to think about from this session. Very interesting to hear about the intersection between climate change and marginalized communities. I have to jump off, but great presentation. Stella, thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate you. We look forward to working with you in the near future, and it has been a nice session. Asante.
Asante.
Goodbye, everyone. Make sure you attend all the other sessions.